Welcome back. I'm Connie from Let's Go Crafting, and today we're going to do a cute little fun stuffed project. These are little jelly beans, so I've got little ones and big ones. My big one happens to have a little pocket that I can put my little ones in or bring them out of. You can choose to have a pocket or choose not to have a pocket. That's totally up to you. Join me to see what we need. Okay, for this project you will need the pattern. A link to the pattern will be in the description for this video. You will need a larger piece of felt for the big jelly bean. If you are planning to make a pocket for the little ones, you will need some regular fabric. For the little jelly bean, you'll need just a little bit of felt, black felt or whatever felt you want for the eyes. I used red embroidery floss for the mouths, and I used black embroidery floss for these eyes. If you're going to hand sew your jelly bean, which is what I did for here, you'll need a needle and thread. You'll need paper scissors to cut the pattern. You never want to use your fabric scissors on the paper. Fabric scissors for fabric. A little bit of yarn for arms and legs if you plan on adding them. Measuring tape or a ruler, pins, tape, and stuffing. So I'm going to use just regular polyester stuffing. You can also use the lint from your dryer if you don't have the store-bought kind. You can use cut up t-shirts, you can use leftover thread and fabric from other projects. You can use just about anything. All right, let's get started. Here we are. I've printed and cut out my patterns. Here's for the little baby jelly bean and here's for the big one. I'm going to lay my pattern onto my felt. Because I want two of felt, I've got my felt folded over so that I'm going to cut them both at the same time. One of the advantages of that is it saves time. You're making one cut for two different pieces. And the other advantage is that they're both the same size. To pin a pattern to fabric, you're going to take your pin, put it into the paper, into both pieces of fabric so it comes out the back side like that. And then, oops, have it come right back out the front. You want to make sure that the pin stays inside the edges of your pattern. If your pin happens to go outside your pattern like that, when you're cutting, it will be very difficult. You don't want to cut your pin. It will ruin your scissors. So we're going to just pin all the way around our big jelly bean. The pins really just hold your pattern to the fabric so that you can get a clean cut and so that the pattern doesn't move around as you're cutting. It just makes it easier than holding it with your hands. Okay, so now I've got my pattern pinned to my fabric and I'm going to start cutting. I'm going to use my fabric shears, and my fabric shears are in the hand that does the cutting. The fabric is held with my other hand, the non-cutting hand. When I'm cutting, I always want my arm and my hand to be in a comfortable position. I never want to have to move my arm in an uncomfortable position. So the thing that moves is the non-cutting hand moves the fabric so that the cutting hand is always in a comfortable position. And you're going to cut out your pattern all the way around. You're going to try not to cut the paper and only cut the felt. I'll be right back when I'm done cutting this out. So now I've cut out my felt. If I'm going to make the jelly bean with a pocket, I will need some other fabric to line the inside. So if you're going to do that, all you need to do is pick the fabric that you want and just pin it on. You will only need one of the felt, of the extra fabric, the pocket fabric. So you will cut that out. You will cut, if you're going to make one of the babies, one of the little cute little babies, you will need 2 pieces of felt that are cut the size for the little one. And then on the big jelly bean, you'll just need 2 circles of felt or buttons or googly eyes if you want. So you're going to cut those. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cut our fabric for the lining if we're making a pocket. We're going to cut out the pattern piece, the felt for the baby jelly beans. And we're going to cut eyes for the big jelly bean. I'll be right back. Okay, so now I have all my pieces cut. I've got both pieces, a front and a back for the big jelly bean. I'm going to make a pocket on my big jelly bean, so I have my fabric. I have a front and a back for my little jelly bean, and I have the eye pieces for my big jelly bean. Anytime that you make a stuffed animal or a pillow, anything that you might be making, before you put it together, all the pieces have to be on. So in this case, we're going to attach the eyes, we're going to make the mouth, and we're going to make the arms and legs first. Then we'll put everything together. So let's start working on our big jelly bean. I'm going to move some of my stuff out of the way so it's not in my way. And I'm going to take the front part of my jelly bean and I'm going to see, where do I want to put these eyes? Let's see what looks nice. I don't know. Do I like them there? I think I'm going to do mine up here like this. I don't want to get them too close to the edge because we'll be sewing this together. So I'm going to kind of try and keep them in the middle. I like where they're placed, so I'm going to pin both of them on so they stay where I want them. And I'm going to sew these on. I'm going to sew them on with the running stitch, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm just going to take out a length of thread. Oops, I cut the wrong end. There we go. That was pretty funny. And then I'm going to thread up my needle. Now, pretty much any needle's going to work. It has to have a sharp end, and it has to have an eye. The little hole in your needle is called the eye. And you stick the end of your thread into the eye of your needle, just like that. And you want to pull it. I always sew with doubled thread. It's stronger. Another advantage is that there's a knot at the end, so my needle doesn't keep falling off. So to make a knot, the first thing you do is put the ends so that they're even together. Then you lay it over your index finger and hold it. Wrap your thread around the index finger and put it over your ends. Like that. So it makes sort of an X like that. Then you just roll it off the tip of your finger. See how it's all wound up on itself? You grab the thread and you pull down, and there you go. You make a little knot. Now I'm gonna show you how to do the running stitch, and then we're gonna start sewing. When we start stitching, we want our knots to be on the inside or the back side of our work. So we always come up from the bottom. Okay? And then to do the running stitch, you go over about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch, put your needle back in your fabric, and pull the thread until it's just laying flat on your fabric. Then you take your needle and you come up again right next to it in line, but about 1/2 inch or 1/4 inch away from this first stitch, and you pull just until the thread is at the fabric. If you pull too hard, it makes your fabric kind of crunch up a little. So you don't want that. You just want the fabric to lay flat. And then you go back down. This is the stitch we're going to do all the way around both of the eyes, okay? Once you go all the way around one eye, you're going to knot your string, cut it off, and then you're going to start over here and do this one. Okay, I'm going to show you how to knot. So we're going to come to the back of our work, and I'm going to gently put my needle just under this stitch that's closest to my thread that's coming out of the fabric. I'm going to pull until it just lays flat. I'm going to go in again from the same side underneath the stitch until I have this little loop. I'm going to go into the loop from the front to the back 1 time and 2 times, and then I'm going to pull tight. And then we're going to, if we cut right here next to our knot, it will eventually come undone. So I'm just going to give him a little bit of space, and that way it won't come undone. We'll never see this because it'll be on the inside of our project. Okay, I'll be right back after I've sewn the eyes onto my jelly bean. So now we're done sewing on our eyes. Now it's time to do the mouth. So I always like a smiley mouth. You can do any mouth you want. It can be like an open mouth. It could be anything you want. I'm going to do another smiley face. They make me happy. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to come over onto my felt, and I'm just going to lightly draw a mouth. Like that. The stitch that we're going to do for our mouth is the back stitch. And notice how with the back stitch, it's a solid stitched line, whereas on our eyes, we did the running stitch, and there's a little space in between each stitch. So this stitch, the back stitch, gives you a solid line. So let's see how to do that. I threaded up with red the same way I threaded up with the black for the eyes. I'm using embroidery floss. If you don't have embroidery floss, that's totally fine. You can just use your regular sewing thread, but instead of 2 strands, use 4 strands, because that will make it thick enough. So let's start. Remember, our knot is at the bottom of our thread, so we want to start at the back of our work like that. Our needle comes out, and right now we're going to do it exactly the same as the running stitch. So we follow our line, and we go down about 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/8 of an inch away from where we came up. We pull our thread like that. The next thing we do is we come up again on our line about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch from where the other stitch went back down to the back, and we come up. Now, if we were doing the running stitch, we would just keep going, but we're doing the back stitch, and in the back stitch, we then go backwards, and we go back in to our previous stitch, where our previous stitch went back to the back of the fabric. go back into that hole. And we pull, and then we do the next one. And we go back. Now I'm going to continue and go all the way to here, and then I'm going to knot my thread at the back of my work, and then we're going to make some legs. I'll see you as soon as my mouth is sewn. So I finished sewing the mouth. I really like the look of the back stitch. I just like how neat and solid that line is. The next thing that we need to do is we need to make our arms and legs. This is just a braid. For those of you who know how to make a braid, each one of my strings I cut 8 inches long. So I did 3 pieces of yarn, 8 inches long each for each arm and each leg. For those of you that don't know, stick around and I'll show you how to braid. Let's do it. So all I did was I measured my yarn 8 inches. And a braid, for just a regular simple braid, you just need 3 pieces that are approximately the same length. And let me get my third one. There we go. Then you put all your ends one side, even like that, and we do an overhand knot. So we just wrap it around our finger, and you tuck your ends into the little loop, and you pull. And you try and get your knot to the end, close to the end. So I just grab my knot and I pull this way. And there I am. And now we're gonna braid. So I'm gonna use a piece of tape. I like to tape down my end because then it makes it stay where I want it. And we have 3 pieces of yarn. We have yarn coming off to the right. We have yarn, a center yarn, and then we have our yarn to the left. To braid, you will take the right yarn, bring it over the center yarn, and set it down. So like that. That makes your center yarn now is a right yarn. Your right yarn is now your center yarn. The next step is to take your left piece of yarn over the center yarn, making that string your left string and your left string your middle string. And it's just a pattern. So you're going to go right over the center and pull, and go left over the center, and then you just cinch it up and it becomes a nice little braid. When you get to the bottom, when you're about maybe here, you'll stop and you'll make another overhand knot just like the top one at the bottom. And what that does is you have one overhand knot at one end, and then you have an overhand knot at the other end that's inside your stuffed jelly bean. I will join you back here again when I have all 4 of my legs made. All right, so now I've got I've got 2 arms and 2 legs, I guess 4 appendages that are braided. I have the front of my jelly bean, I have the lining, and I have the back of my jelly bean. And now we're going to assemble it. If you're going to have a little pocket for your little baby jelly beans, now is the time to cut the slit. So it's pretty much anywhere you want it. So I'm gonna draw a little line right here because that's where it's going to be. You can see that. And now I want to cut on that line. So I'm going to fold it in half, make a little snip on the line, which gives me just enough space to get my scissor in there. And I'm not going to cut all the way to the edge. I don't want to cut my jelly bean in half. I just want to make a little slit. Okay? So that the little guys can fit in there. Okay. Now we're going to layer. So it's going to be the front, the lining, and the back all lined up together like this. Okay. Now we want to make sure that the arms and the legs are where we want them. This jelly bean is not going to be turned right side out or inside out. We're just going to sew all the way around the outside so it can look like this. I think I'm going to put the legs, like one here and one there. So those will be the first 2 pins. I'm going to pick up my fabric and my front jelly bean. I think I'm gonna put this side in because when I braided it, it came out kind of uneven. So I'm gonna stick that on the inside. Fold my fabric back down and pin it in place so that it stays. So now it'll stay till I sew it. And I'm gonna look at this one. And I'm going to look at it, and this is more even and this is less even. So this is the side I'm going to hide. There's 2 legs. I'm going to pin this leg in. And then I'm going to do the same with the arms. And I'm just going to figure out where do I want them. One right there. That's pretty good. There's no real markings for your arms and legs because you can put them wherever you want. You can also have your jelly bean have more than 2 arms and more than 2 legs if you wish. If you wanted hair to be sticking out, now would be the time to do that. Otherwise, we're just going to pin all the way around. The rule of thumb is about a hand width apart. I'm going to quickly pin this together. You pin close to the edge. It goes through all the layers. And then it kind of comes vertical again. And it comes out the front again. Okay. Pins just hold all your fabric together so that it doesn't slide. Now, we're going to need a place to put stuffing. So as I'm looking at this, this would be the easiest place to add stuffing. So I'm going to leave a hole. And when I leave a hole, when I'm not going to sew in a certain place, on each side of the hole, I put 2 pins. So I'm going to sew all the way around. But I'm not sewing here. I'm not sewing between the double pins. On this jelly bean, I sewed the entire thing by hand. You can see it's the running stitch. It's the same stitch that we use to go around the eyes. For this yellow one, I think I'm going to use the sewing machine. So I will meet you over at the sewing machine. Here we are at the sewing machine. I'm not going to sew in between here, so I'm going to start sewing right here at these 2 pins. I'm going to put my fabric onto the sewing machine so that the edge of the fabric is at the edge of my presser foot. So it's right there. I'm going to take my pins out. I never sew over my pins. I'm going to put my presser foot down. And now I'm going to start sewing. So I'm going to sew forward. Now for those of you who are sewing by hand, you will just keep sewing because you have already put a knot on the end of your string. For us on the sewing machines for right now, we have to do a reverse stitch. So somewhere on your machine, there is a lever that says reverse. That's your back stitch. So you will engage your back stitch. You will go back maybe 2 or 3 stitches. You will let it go. and then you will keep sewing. Okay? You will try and keep the edge of your presser foot on the edge of your fabric. And as you come to your pins, you take them out. Some people sew over their pins. I don't. Most of the time, if you sew over your pins, everything is going to be fantastic. Nothing is going to happen. Once in a while, if you sew over your pins, either the pin or your needle in your sewing machine is going to break. That's okay, because you would just throw those away and then put a new one in. However, once in a while, if you hit a pin and the needle doesn't break and the pin doesn't break, then your needle gets shoved up into your sewing machine, and that's a problem that has to be fixed in the shop. I don't want to do that, so I'm gonna not sew over them. Now, if you've noticed, as I'm going around the curve, I'm going really slow and I'm rotating my fabric as I go. If that doesn't work for you and you start to sew off like that, see how my presser foot is coming off? You just stop, you lift your presser foot, and you readjust your fabric so that the edge is again at the edge of your fabric, okay? So again, I'm coming off. I don't want to do that. I'll make sure my needle is into my fabric. I'll lift my presser foot, rotate my fabric slightly, and now my presser foot is back against the edge of my fabric. I'm going to sew all the way around until I get to these two pins again. I'm going to back stitch here, and then I'll be back. So that's what I'm going to do. See you in a minute. So now I've sewn all the way around. If you've sewn by hand and you've stopped here, don't knot. Leave your string and your needle just hanging down. Because I was sewing on the sewing machine, I had to stop, so I did a back stitch. To stuff it, you would open it up, and you're going to put the stuffing between the lining and the back. You want to make sure your stuffing is not going to come out your little slit here. To stuff, you'll take a little bit of your stuffing or your dryer lint or your cut up t-shirts, and you stick it into your jelly bean, and you want to push it to the farthest most point. So you're going to build up like this till you reach about here, and then you're going to build down, and then you're going to fill in here. Once your jelly bean is at the right stiffness for you, then you're going to sew up the edge. Now, it doesn't matter whether you sewed by hand or by machine. When you sew up your edge here, you're going to have to do that by hand. And that'll be done exactly the same way around here. You'll use the back or the running stitch again. I will see you back at this point after you've closed that up. I'm not going to stuff mine. I've got one that's stuffed, and I think I'm going to leave this one without any stuffing. I think it kind of looks cute. I'll see you back in just a minute after you've stuffed your jelly bean or you haven't, and we've all closed up our hole. I'll see you in just a second. Here we are. If you've stuffed your jelly bean will look like this. If you've not, it will look like this. And both of them are super cute. I'm going to set the big ones aside over here, and we're going to work on our little jelly beans. Aren't they so cute? I think they're so cute. Okay, so I have my pieces of felt that are all cut. Just like the other one, the first thing we're going to do is put the eyes and the mouth on. So I'm just going to make a little dot where I want the eyes, and then I'm just going to draw a little mouth. Now the eyes are done in a stitch called the French knot. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So you hold your piece of fabric, you come from the back, and you try and put the needle right in the dot that you made for the eyes. And then you pull so that your knot is at the back. Now the next step, I'm going to lay the fabric onto the table here. The next step is I'm going to hold my thread. I'm going to lay my needle close to my fabric, like that. And I'm going to wrap the thread around twice, the needle. So 1 time and 2 times. So you have 2 wraps, okay? I'm going to hold the wraps with this finger, like this. And I'm going to take the tip of my needle. See where the thread is coming out of my fabric? I'm going to take the tip of my needle and put it right next to that thread. I don't want it to go in the same hole. Now my needle is sticking out of my fabric. I've got my 2 wraps looking like that. I want to hold on to the wraps and use my thumb to push them all the way to the fabric and hold them down. Then I use my other hand and I pull the needle and the thread until my thread is right at the top. Now, if I were to pull this super tight, the knot would look a little strange, but I just pulled until my thread came close to the top. And there's 1 eye, and that's 1 French knot. Let's do the other one. Come back up. I'm going to put my fabric down on the table and wrap twice. Now the thing about French knots, we're wrapping twice. Now if you wanted the eye to be bigger, you would wrap more times. So 3, 4, whatever you thought was the size you wanted. So pull this tight, hold it with your fingernail, hold it close to the fabric, and pull your needle. And now you're done. Now I'm going to turn this over, and I have a little stitch at the back, so I'm going to knot my thread to this stitch just like we did on the big jelly beans. I'll be right back after I've knotted and cut my thread. Okay, so now we've got our eyes. Now we're going to put the mouth on. The mouth is done exactly the same way as the big jelly bean. We're just going to do, oopsie, I pulled him right out of the frame. We're going to do a back stitch exactly like we did for the big jelly bean. And now if you don't have embroidery floss, it doesn't matter. You can use whatever you have. For both the eyes and the mouth, you'll want to have 4 strands. It just adds enough thickness that you can see it on top of the fabric. So I'm going to do 1 more stitch and then the mouth is done. And I'll be right back after my knot. All right, so now the mouth is on, the eyes are on, and now you'll decide if you want your baby jelly bean to have arms and legs like this one, or if you don't. I like them both ways, but I'll show you how to do the arms and the legs. You'll take 4 strands of whatever thread you have, regular sewing thread or embroidery floss, and you'll measure out 4 inches. Okay, so you'll need 4 of these that are 4 inches long. So you have something that looks like that. You're going to put just 1 overhand knot near one end, kind of like that. There's the knot. And you want another overhand knot. And now my arms and legs turned out to be about 1.5 inches. So I wanted it to be, I've got my knot on the 1 inch, and I kind of want it close to the 2.5 inch, and it's not pulling that way. So I'll just use my fingers to push it down to where I want it. not exact, but close enough. So now this arm is 1 3/4 inches long. So I would try then, I'll cut off the ends past the knot. So then I would try and get the rest of them to be the same size. I'll be right back with my legs made, and hopefully yours will be made as well. Alrighty, so now I have the eyes and the mouth on. I've made the arms and the legs, and now it's time to put everything together. So I'm just gonna set the top, the front over the back, like that. And I'm gonna decide where do I want one of the arms. And I'm just gonna lay it in there, kind of like that. Okay? I'm just gonna hold everything together with my hands. I know that I'm gonna leave this part open to stuff. And I'm gonna start with my needle at the back. And actually, if you want to totally hide your knot, start inside. And now your knot is on the inside. And now you're just going to do the running stitch all the way around. When you get to the arm or the leg, you're going to take little stitches. Try and put your needle in between those two. So in between, so if you can see, the needle is going in the middle of the threads. Okay, so I'm going to pull that tight. Then I'm going to come to the other side of the arm. I'm going to go back into the middle. And then I'm going to come back out on the first side. And then I'm going to just continue around. So what you're going to do is you're going to sew with the running stitch all the way around. As you come to the points that you want the arms and the legs, so you'll probably want your other arm right here, you'll just lay it in there. You'll sew it like I showed you right here. So you're just kind of wrapping the threads around it so it doesn't come out. You'll do the same with one leg, the same with the other leg. And when you get to here, you'll stop sewing. Don't knot your thread, just let it hang because we're gonna stuff. I'll see you back at this point. I am finished going around. The arms and the legs are sewn on. I have my gap to stuff it. Now, this is a teeny tiny thing to stuff. I've left my thread running free with the needle because I'm gonna have to close that up. So now I'm gonna put some stuffing in. Stuffing something this small can be a little tricky. You really need tiny bits to stuff it. And my fingers are a little bit big. So I get it in there, I get it started with my fingers, and then I get my pencil. And I use the eraser end to get the stuffing to go into the jelly bean. Okay? So now I've got stuffing up here, which is what I want. You always start, when you stuff, the farthest point from the opening is first. But I don't really have anything here. So I'm going to get another little bit. Just a teeny little bit. Stick that in. Start it with my fingers. And then use the eraser end to work it in. And it does take a little bit to get it in there, as you can see, right? You have to push it in, kind of block the opening with your fingers, push it in a little more. And now I think I'm at the very end. So I'm really going to use all my digits of my hand. A little bit more with the pencil. And there it is. I've got my stuffing in. But now I really have to close up that edge because I really don't want the stuffing falling out of here. So I'm just going to continue on with the running stitch close to the edge. Pulling it tight as I go. And then when I get to the end, I will make a little knot. Wait, I have like 1 or 2 more stitches. There we go. Nice and tight. Turn it over. Grab a little bit of the fabric. Make my loop. Then I'm going to go through it twice. Pull tight. Now I want to hide the end of this, so I can't really cut it there because I know the knot will come undone. I don't want to cut it here because then it'll show. So I'm going to do something called burying my thread. I'm going to take the tip of my needle. I'm going to put it in the fabric right by the knot. And then I'm going to make the tip come out somewhere else. I'm going to pull like that. Now when I cut here, there we go, all done. And now you've got your big jelly bean, you've got your little jelly bean that can sit there, or you can just stuff them all in. If you've stuffed your big jelly bean looks like that. And then when you're ready to play with your little ones, you take them out again. And that's it. See you next time.